Good morning, students, or good afternoon, good evening, depending what time you're watching this video. My name is Gavin from Gate English Training School, and welcome back for our second video in this course on IELTS writing. If you haven't caught the first video, go back and watch that one first because they do kind of progress in order. And if you haven't seen our series on speaking, go back and look at the 10 videos, actually, the videos we have recorded on speaking. Today, we're going to continue writing, looking at task 1. And within that course, we're going to look today at a couple of things. First, we're going to look at the overall structure for task 1 and talk a lot more about main features because that is a very important thing and I use the expression a lot. And to fill out the video, we're going to also look at signposting language and the kind of language we use to organize our writing. Okay, so let's get started by first looking at the task 1 structure. Now, generally, there's a fairly simple 4-paragraph structure you would be using, starting, of course, with an introduction, having usually 2 or maybe 3 BPs and a conclusion. Now, I'm going to use the expression BP a lot just to save me saying body paragraph. Some people might call that the main paragraph. This is the same in task 1 and task 2 writing. We have an introduction, the body of your writing, and then usually a conclusion. Okay, so BP, body paragraph. Think of the introduction as the head, then the body, and then the legs. Okay, the main part is the body of your writing or the body of the essay. Okay, so BP1, BP2, BP3, and maybe a conclusion. The reason why I say maybe a conclusion, well, is it really necessary? I've come across different books that say different things and different teachers who say different things. Now, as somebody who's done a lot of writing and who was always very good at writing at school and university, I've always felt to get the top score, you need a conclusion. If you're not able to write introduction, 3 BPs and a conclusion, you're not going to get 8s and 9s. Now, for most of you, that's not an issue. You don't want to get a score that high. Most people are just looking for 6s and 7s. In fact, for most of you, for writing, most people would be happy to get over 6, 6.5. So in that situation, I'd say a conclusion is not necessary, but if you have the ability to write quickly, then you can always put it in. The other thing about a conclusion is that it can fill up time if you're struggling with what to write. Okay, so if you don't know what to put in a BP3, you can put in a conclusion to get your words over 150. Okay, if you're aiming for a very high score, you should throw in a conclusion to finalize what you have written. Okay, so when I'm writing, I'm always going to use a conclusion because I can comfortably write everything else in that time and still summarize those key points at the end. Essentially, the shorter your writing, the less the need there actually is for a conclusion. But unfortunately, when you're writing too little, you need a conclusion to get the words. Okay. Actually, let's just talk a second about that again. In task 2, use a conclusion. You must have a conclusion in task 2. I am going to look at task 2 later, but I don't want people to be confused now. Maybe you won't watch that video for a while. Task 2, you must have a conclusion. Okay. And no matter which one, you must always have an introduction, both task 1 and task 2. So essentially, we're going to have 4 or 5 paragraphs. Okay. 3 body paragraphs at most, must have an introduction, and at least 2 body paragraphs. Okay, so don't panic. If you've written 3 really good body paragraphs, you've got lots of information and you don't have time for a conclusion, don't stress. You can leave it out because if you put in lots of information about the graph, that's better than having a conclusion. Okay, there's 2 kind of structures I would look at using for your task 1 writing. The first one you can see here. Okay. BP1, your main features. Report the most important things from the graph or chart first without explaining too many numbers or details. Then you might say some other comparisons and give a little bit of details about maybe what you've said earlier in the main features, kind of give an expansion on what you said earlier, kind of explanation of what you said. And then if you still have time, you go, well, I've still got 5 minutes or so. Let's just pick some other important information or details from that graph and put it in there. And then a conclusion if we have time. Okay. The second option here is to have one main feature and then a sentence that has details about that main feature. And then in the next paragraph, you take a second main feature and then add some details that explain that main feature. And then you can continue to do the same thing in your BP3 or have a conclusion or both. Okay, I don't want to confuse people too much. The main thing is you need to have both sides. A broad main feature that looks at the big picture. Okay, and some details and reporting of some of the numbers. If you do what most people do and you just have the reporting of the numbers and little details with no overview, no main feature, you're not going to get a good score. Okay, but if you only have the broad main features without any detailed numbers, you're also going to not get higher than really a 6 for TA there. So you want both, of course. Most people watching this video, most of us, we want to get our scores up to 6.5s and 7s or higher. We want to put both in there. Okay, so broad main features and details. The other thing about that is they use different grammar structures, which we'll see in a moment. When you give a broad main feature, we can see that overall there is a trend, this kind of trend, versus this one went up, then down. There's two different kinds of grammar structures, different kinds of language, which helps us with our grammar score and our vocabulary score, because you're using different grammar and vocabulary to describe those two different kinds of things. Alrighty, now, main features. You have now probably heard me say the phrase main feature 20 or 30 times in just 1.5 videos. Maybe not 20 times, but yeah, a lot. It's not my word. Where do I get it from? Let's have a look at the IELTS questions you're going to get every time. You will see the basic sentence about the graph. Then you will see this sentence. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So this word, that phrase, main feature, that has nothing to do with my idea. That is taken from the question. I am stunned at how many IELTS books, especially those published by Chinese companies or schools, that have no idea about that. How can you miss it? It's in every question. Most books published by, say, Oxford and Cambridge publishers, like the British Council, most of those books will generally talk about the overview or the main features. But a lot of books I've seen, and I won't mention companies because I don't want to get in trouble, but most companies I've seen that have been published by, say, a Chinese school, like an English teaching school in China, they don't get the key issues. They just don't understand the IELTS test. And this is the number one thing. This is the most important thing you have to do. It tells you every single question. Report the main features. Okay. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that that is what you must do first. Okay. The question asks you to do that. Okay. Let's have a look at something else here. The band descriptors. Now, don't worry if you please do not get upset. Oh, I can't see it. The writing's too small. Don't worry. I don't want you to see this. I'll show you a bigger copy in a second. This is the public version, meaning you can go onto the internet and you can get this. There's nothing wrong with this. This is not me giving away the IELTS secrets. Anybody can get this document. Okay, these are the band descriptors. you can't see very clearly, but you can probably see here band 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I've cut off a 0. 0 means you didn't write anything. You handed in a piece of blank paper. And you probably don't understand anything I'm saying if you did that. So the band descriptors, it describes what you need to do to get that band. And again, so I'm coming back to the phrase main features. Where do we see that in the band descriptors? Okay, so I promised you I'd show you a bigger one here. Now, considering that most of you are trying to give from 5s up to 6 and 7 scores, let's have a look at some of the language. Okay, now, on the band descriptors, they don't actually use the phrase main features. They use that in the question, though, so it is in the question, which is more important, really. But it does have some similar language. Overview of the main trends and highlight key features. So it's basically the same thing. Main features, overview, key features, main trends, they all mean the same kind of thing. I'm going to use the phrase main features because it is used in the question. Okay, that's why I use it. You see it there every time. So if you want to get a 7, have a look at that sentence there. If you want to get a 7, you need to present a clear overview of the main trends, differences, or stages, but also highlight the key features. Okay, so you they're pretty much the same thing, but they're clearly presented. That's where most people probably don't get a 7. It's pretty easy to do these, but to do it clearly is the thing that stops people going from the 6 to a 7. Okay, let's have a look at the 6. Presents an overview. See the difference, the word clear. So basically this means that maybe it's not, when I read it, I'm a little bit confused. I don't get it clearly. I understand it, I know what you're saying, but it's not, I have to think a little bit to get your meaning. Highlights key features. And again, clearly presents adequately. Adequately means you've done enough. You know, you've done the job. You've basically mentioned, you've said the actual key features, the main features. Not more. You maybe haven't extended them. They might be a little bit wrong, but you've mentioned them. You've said the key features. You get a 6, as easy as that. That's the thing that stuns me. So many books don't talk about this, but all you need to do to get a 6 for TA, task achievement, is just to mention the most important factors from that graph. What most of you are doing is this. No clear overview, or you present but inadequately cover the key features. So maybe you've got some of the key features, but you haven't adequately covered them there. Okay, so that's the way we're trying to move ourselves up. 1, if you have an overview and cover, say, 3 of key features, the really ones that anybody should be able to see, you get a 6. Done. Easy. Finished. Focus on grammar and vocabulary and you're sorted. It really should not be hard to get 6s and 7s for task achievement. Okay, as long as you do it, you go from here to here. Okay. Now, a lot of you are still probably saying, what are main features? Now, we're going to have a look in a moment at some main features, and pretty much the next 2 videos after this, we're just going to look at lots and lots of task 1 writing tasks and analyze them for their main features and how we would write them. Okay, so don't worry if you're still not clear right now. We're going to move on and look at that in a second.